So I'm working on an article arguing that people on the kind of traditionalist right or traditionalist conservatism or whatever are actually on the left pretty much. So let's have a quick look at that. And I was going to, that's not it. I was going to wait to finish that before I make a video, but actually the news today is so interesting and it's kind of proving my point. And what I think is happening is that not only are these people, these traditionalists, pretty much on the left, they're also, I think, out of touch. When you look at the news, it seems to me that all the criticism coming from them of libertarianism is completely out of touch with what's happening. And all the news, as far as I'm concerned, is vindicating the libertarian position. And that's what I'm going to be arguing in this video. Very quickly, let's have a look at this article that I'm working on. So the article is that there's a kind of a Chomsky postmodern traditionalism, and identify Cameron McGregor and academic agent Parvini as being this kind of postmodern traditionalism. And the reason I'm arguing in this article that they are on the left is that they pretty much agree with the left, both on the methodology, in particular on the approach to theory, and on the statism and the methods of achieving their goals. The only thing that they differ on is the goals, namely wokeism and multiculturalism versus anti-wokeism. It's a single issue difference. Other than that, they are identical. And this is interesting because I was listening to Jeff Dice of the Mises Institute and his podcasts covering Hans Hermann Hoppe's book, Democracy, the God That Failed. And in chapter 10, Hoppe discusses conservatism and libertarianism. And I want to make a more thorough reading of this chapter, but just very quickly, before we look at the news, I wanted to have a look at what Hoppe says in this chapter on conservatism and libertarianism. And what Hoppe does is that he distinguishes two meanings of conservatism. And one meaning is basically the idea that you just conserve the status quo. So whatever's the situation, you just don't change anything, or try to, keep as much as possible. And he says that that's pretty meaningless. That's a meaningless concept of conservatism. But a lot of conservatives are like that. And then the other concept of conservatism that is more meaningful is that conservative refers to someone who believes, so this is the first meaning. The second meaning is conservative refers to someone who recognizes the old and natural. Sorry, I've gone too far. Okay, so conservative refers to someone who believes in existence of a natural order, a natural state of affairs which corresponds to the nature of things, of nature and man. This natural order is and can be disturbed by accidents and anomalies like earthquakes, hurricanes, diseases, pests, monsters, and beasts, etc. But a bit of abstraction, he says, removes all the clutter and enables nearly everyone to see what is and what is not natural and in accordance with the nature of things. Okay, so Hoppe argues that it is possible to identify what is natural and what is not. In particular, he thinks that in human society, the natural thing is the family and a hierarchy that is based around the family, and that these are universals. So I would call this kind of approach anthropological, and I'm very interested in the work of Bronisław Malinowski, and he's not that well known, but he should be, because he actually could be viewed as the founder of modern anthropology. And he is a Polish guy, so I'm biased a bit, but I wrote about him in my PhD dissertation, so I'm very familiar with him. And he was basically sidelined because of the academic left took over academia and turned anthropology into a total joke. And in particular, the reason for that, for sidelining him, is that he argued that the family is a human universal. And the whole thing with matriarch, and in particular patriarchy, that there are very few matriarchal societies. Most, virtually all societies are based around the family and based around patriarchy. And Malinowski was in a running debate with another guy, and I'm going to make a video about that. It's a very interesting, who was a kind of a proto-feminist, and actually a lot of people in the early manosphere, like 10 years ago, were citing this law, Faux law, as a French guy. And the law was that unless there's transfer of property to the woman, there's no marriage. And that guy was actually a proto-feminist. And when I pointed this out to these manosphere people, this is a long time ago. This is the early manosphere. This kind of really, got in their way, because they really relied on this law to make some kind of a rhetorical point. And I said, well, this guy is actually a feminist. You're citing a feminist. And here's Malinowski saying that no, patriarchy is the norm. And it just didn't make any sense. A lot of these debates, people use some kind of a pseudo-intellectual argument like that. But they were running with it for ages. And there's all these guys, oh yeah, the brute force law, Yeah, there was some truth to it, but when you looked at the context, the intellectual context, this guy was just a joke. And Malinowski really showed, empirically, that the family and kind of in particular patriarchy is the natural, universal across all the different societies. And that's actually the interesting thing about anthropology, is that rather than just what it became more recently, where it just describes this, that, and the other, and maybe, make some points about how all these different societies are so different, so relative. He was actually showing that there are a lot of universal, a lot of the, social organizations, there are universals there. And then when you see the same thing happening across radically different cultures, from the Eskimos to the people in the jungle in Papua New Guinea, and you can see that basically they organize their society in pretty much the same way. That's a human universal. And I think that's what Hoppe is talking about when he's talking about the natural way of organizing society, right? So he thinks that the conservative refers to someone who recognizes the old and natural through the noise of anomalies and accidents, and who defends, supports, and helps to preserve it against the temporary and anomalous. So what he's saying is that you want your society to reflect these human universals, right? You don't want to go against human nature. And he thinks that the family, so the conservative recognizes families, fathers, mothers, children, grandchildren, and households based on private property and in cooperation with the community of other households as the most fundamental and natural, essential, ancient, and indispensable social units. Okay, so moreover, the family household also represents the model of the social order at large. Just as hierarchical order exists in a family, so is there a hierarchical order within a community of families, of apprentices, servants, vassals, knights, lords, overlords, and even kings, tied together by an elaborate and intricate system of kinship relations. Conservatives, or more specifically, Western Greco-Christian conservatives, if they stand for anything, stand for and want to preserve the family and the social hierarchies and layers of material as well as spiritual, intellectual authority based on and growing out of family bonds and kinship relations. Okay, so Hoppe thinks that the family really is the basic model and the most natural form of organization, and that you have a family relations, and you have hierarchy. And that's what conservatives need to be thinking about and basing their understanding of society on that natural mode of human organization. Now, then Hoppe talks about contemporary conservatism and why conservatives today must be anti-statist libertarians, and why libertarians must be conservatives. Okay, so he thinks that there needs to be a coincidence of libertarianism and conservatism, just the way he just explained it. So modern conservatism in the United States and Europe is confused and distorted. This confusion is largely due to democracy. So I'm going to skip some of that. So democracy has led to decay of families, divorce, illegitimacy, loss of authority, multiculturalism, alternative lifestyles, social disintegration, sex, and crime. All of these phenomena represent anomalies and scandalous deviations from the natural order. And the conservative must indeed be opposed to all of these developments and try to restore normalcy. However, most contemporary conservatives, at least most of the spokesmen of the conservative establishment, either do not recognize that their goal of restoring normalcy requires the most drastic, even revolutionary anti-statist social changes, or if they know about this, they are members of the fifth column engaged in destroying conservatism from inside, and hence must be regarded as evil. That this is largely true for the so-called neoconservatives does not require further explanation. So what he's saying here is that the neoconservatives recognize that restoring the natural order means abolishing the state. They recognize this, and they're within the conservative movement, and they oppose this goal from within, right? So basically, they are double agents. So these neoconservatives are not truly concerned about cultural matters, but recognize that they must play the cultural conservatism card so as not to lose power and promote their entirely different goal of global social democracy. So they're hiding their true goal. Okay, they recognize that they have to pretend to be social conservative, right? So these are people in American conservative movement. They're the neocons. They pretend to be socially conservative when in reality they're leftists. However, it is also true of many conservatives who are genuinely concerned about family disintegration or dysfunction and cultural rot. I'm thinking here in particular of the conservatism represented by Patrick Buchanan and his movement. Buchanan's conservatism is by no means as different from that of the Conservative Republican Party Republican Party establishment as he and his followers fancy themselves. In one decisive respect, their brand of conservatism is in full agreement with that of the conservative establishment. Both are statists. They differ over what exactly needs to be done to restore normalcy to the US, but they agree that it must be done by the state. There's not a trace of principled anti-statism in neither. I'm sorry, I need to make sure that for some reason, I'm not really good at operating this. Okay, so he goes on. Let me illustrate by quoting Samuel Francis, one of the leading theoreticians and strategists of the Buchananite movement. After deploring anti-white and anti-Western propaganda, militant secularism, acquisitive egoism, economic and political globalism, democratic inundation, and unchecked state centralism, he expounds on a new spirit of America first, which implies not only putting national interest over those of other nations and abstractions like world leadership, global harmony, and the New World Order, but also giving priority to the nation over the gratification of individual and subnational interests. So far, so good. But how does he propose to fix the problem of moral degeneration and cultural rot? Those parts of the federal leviathan responsible for the proliferation of moral and cultural pollution, such as the Department of Education, the National Endowment of the Arts, and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and the federal judiciary should be closed or cut down to size. But there's no opposition against the state's involvement in educational matters. There's no recognition that the natural order in education means that the state has nothing to do with it. Education is entirely a family matter. So Hoppe is saying, well, you can get rid of all these things that are, like promoting these leftist ideas. But the thing is, why is the state educating your children, right? They're your children, and now you're sending them, right? And you have no choice. Basically, the state decides what your children learn. Well, that is not consistent with the natural order, which is basically that the family is the primary unit, and a family needs to make all the decisions about things like education. So he continues, moreover, there's no recognition that moral degeneracy and cultural rot have deeper causes and cannot simply be cured by state-imposed curriculum changes or exhortations and declamations. To the contrary, Francis proposes that the cultural turnaround, the restoration of normalcy, can be achieved without a fundamental change in the structure of the modern welfare state. Indeed, Buchanan and his ideologues explicitly defend the three core institutions of the welfare state, namely Social Security, Medicare, and employment subsidies. They even want to expand the social responsibilities of the state by assigning to it the task of protecting, by means of national import and export restrictions, American jobs, especially in industries of national concern, and insulate the wages of US workers from foreign laborers who must work for $1 an hour or less. In fact, Buchananites freely admit that they're statists. They detest and ridicule capitalism, laissez-faire, free markets and trade, wealth, elites and nobility, and they advocate a new populist, indeed proletarian conservatism, which amalgamates social and cultural conservatism and social or socialist economics. Thus, continues Francis, While the left could win Middle Americans through its economic measures, it lost them through its social and cultural radicalism. And while the right could attract Middle Americans through appeals to law and order and defense of sexual normality, conventional morals and religion, traditional social institutions, and invocation of nationalism and patriotism, it lost Middle Americans when it rehearsed its old bourgeois economic formulas. Hence, it is necessary to combine the economic policies of the left and the nationalism and cultural conservatism of the right to create, quote, a new identity synthesizing both the economic interests and cultural national loyalties of the proletarianized middle class in a separate and unified political movement, unquote. For obvious reasons, this doctrine is not so named, but there is a term for this type of conservatism. It is called social nationalism or national socialism. Okay, so if you look at my videos, right, I discuss Carl Benjamin. This is exactly Carl Benjamin's position. Okay, he wants to use the same means, statist means, okay, of redistribution to gain political, right, to attract the overeducated lad, right, the overeducated and underemployed lad. It's basically, we are socially conservative, we are against the social rot, but everything else is the same as the left. We're competing in exactly the same way, and we essentially kind of anti-free market, anti-bourgeois egalitarians. That is their position. This is what Hermann Hoppe is talking about. All right, so these people are national socialists, social nationalists. They're on the left. Now, I in my article, there are 2 points that I make, 2 major points, namely that they don't have a theory. So when you argue with them, they are postmodernists, they're relativists. In other words, what they do is the way Hermann Hoppe explains it, and I think it's accurate because it's a philosophical argument, basically, if you're an empiricist, even if you look at the data, the question is everything a matter of data, or are there any a priori foundations of knowledge? If you reject any a priori foundations of knowledge, any a priori truths, right, then you basically say, well, knowledge is facts the way I organize them. In other words, I have a model, and the model organizes the facts in this way or the other, and then the different models, that's what they mean by theories. Usually it's just these models that they construct. And the postmodern position is the different models are incommensurable. There's no way of deciding between 2 models. So if I'm arguing with Cameron McGregor about China, and I point to this, so let's say he goes, well, look at all the industries in China. Look how successful they are. They are producing all these EVs, and they're so effective, and they're engaging in high tech, and they're building all these trains, right? And I would point, well, yeah, but all of this is, first of all, all the trains are built in mega cities of 20 million people. You have a ton of density there, right? So you're packing all these people and stacking them up on 40-floor apartment buildings and cities of 20 million people. Yeah, of course, that will give you the density to build all these trains that you've basically imported the intellectual property, the technology from Europe, from European companies. Like, you all allow these companies to build the trains in China, but only on the the deal is you have to give us your technology. So all this technology is taken, right, because these companies wanted to enter the Chinese market. Then secondly, with the EVs, it's totally astroturfed. It's not a free market. All of that is essentially the Green New Deal and Chinese subsidies. What the Chinese government subsidizing the industry, which means that the Chinese taxpayer instead of having the tax money, either keeping it to themselves and spending it the way they want, or having it go toward stuff that they can use, they're subsidizing an industry that is basically geared towards selling EVs that basically no one wants. Okay, the free market did not decide we need EVs. It was basically the Chinese state planners, the Politburo, decided to go, okay, we're going to go into EVs. It's state planning. And now all of that is going to implode. Now, he can throw a bunch of numbers to prove his point, and then I can give a completely different analysis of the same facts. And our analyses are incommensurable. This is the problem in philosophy of incommensurability of frameworks. In other words, you have different theories, and these theories both account for all the facts, but there's no way of deciding between them, okay? Because once you eliminate epistemological foundationalism, in other words, any basic knowledge, any basis, right, foundation for knowledge, okay, and which has to be a priori. You see, this is the thing, it has to be a priori. It has to be something that is not based on data, because the data can be organized any way you want it. Okay. So, for example, if you have economic growth, and then you have growth in regulations and taxes, and then a statist will say, look, there's a correlation between regulations and taxes and economic growth. Therefore, you need regulations and taxes to get economic growth, right? Or I was watching a debate by Bob Murphy arguing with one of the MMT guys, modern monetary theory guys, and the MMT guy, he goes, well, look, when the government gives all these people money, they have money in the bank account. That's good. Everyone's rich. And Bob Murphy says, well, if you give everyone like $1 million, are you going to make everyone a millionaire? It just makes no sense, right? And it's just you don't have to look, you don't have to, it's not an empirical issue. You just, as soon as you think about it, that why doesn't the state just print money? And the MMT guy, he has some explanation. Well, because they're keeping the money in the bank account, they're not spending it, so it doesn't go into inflation. So he will have some model to kind of fit things into the way he thinks. He doesn't have any a priori basis for his theory. He has no theory. He has a model. And that's the same thing with Cameron McGregor. He will say, well, look, here's some aggregates, here's some data. Look at all the cars that China is manufacturing. Aren't they great? And it's hand waving. It's like, oh, well, what about this? What about this? Right? But there's no theory. And he goes, well, but your theory is not valid now. It's valid, and that's empiricism, right? But that's not what Austro-libertarians are talking about. When they talk about when there's an exchange between two people and it's voluntary, that means that the exchange has to benefit both people. Otherwise, there's no exchange. That's not an empirical theory. Like, why would two people engage in economic exchange if they're not both? Like, if I give someone money for a coffee, that means I value the coffee more than I value the money. Otherwise, there would be no exchange. And the cafe owner values the money more than he or she values the coffee. That's not an empirical theory. So yeah, there is. I'm not saying that there are no empirical theories. I'm just saying that if you're just a pure empiricist, then you become a relativist, and then it's just a matter of Cameron McGregor going, well, look at this, and then me going, well, look at this, and it's like, well, look at this, well, look at this, and it's like we can just go on like that. This argumentative ping pong, okay, which doesn't really go anywhere, right? So so that's my point, is that they're relativists. Both Cameron McGregor and Nima Parvini are both relativists. They're both postmoderns. And in that sense, they're identical with the left. That's how the left operates. After Marxist theory crashed and burned and failed to predict, they decided, okay, let's go for postmodernism. That's why they went for postmodernism, because their theory, Marxism, failed. But they didn't want to give up. So they go, well, empiricism tells us we can just tweak the theory and then try again. And they do these experiments, right? And then the other thing that they share with the leftists, meaning Nima Parvini and McGregor and that camp, is that they want to control education. In other words, they want social engineering. They want top down. So when Cameron McGregor goes, well, look at China, they have China, look, there are these Chinese characteristics, right? And their political system matches their Chinese characteristics. And the question is that grassroots or is that AstroTurf? Well, who devised where did Cameron McGregor get the Chinese characteristics from? Did he go to talk to the man in the street, or did he go to some CCP party document where they basically decided these are the Chinese characteristics? And now, if you are like in a school in China, you have to read what your Chinese characteristics are. Well, that is top-down social engineering. And now, so what they want is they want that, but for the whites. So now I'm going to be in a white ethno-state, Cameron McGregor's white ethno-state, and he's going to write his book about what are the white man's characteristics and white man's masculinity. And then I have to sit there like a good student. So currently I have to go to a diversity training seminar, but in a white ethno state, I'm going to be going to Cameron McGregor's diversity training. Now it's diversity training seminar. And that's going to be replaced by the white ethno state, white masculinity seminar. And he's going to tell me what it means to be a man, a white man, and how many kids I have to have. And that's the implication. They're basically mirror images of each other than one wants diversity and the other one, and social liberalism, and the other one wants anti-diversity. Right? But the thing is, the egalitarianism, all that stuff is the same. The brainwashing, the astroturfing, it's all the same. So now, in this video, I want to argue, look, these people are completely out of touch. So let's have a look at the news today to show because they're saying, look, you libertarians, you're out of touch. Elon Musk, oh, look, Ayn Rand, oh my God, gross, right? These libertarians, they're so, it's these threads are completely out of touch. Let's have a look. Let me just, okay. So let's start with this one. So here we have Trump, and he's basically saying, look, all this, so the narrative, the trad narrative, I don't know what to call them, right? I'm going to call them trad, means Nima Parvini, Cameron McGregor, right? Their main argument is against libertarianism, as far as I can tell, is that libertarianism is Elon Musk. So libertarianism equals Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy equals H1B1 visas, equals no jobs for the white lad, for the overeducated and underemployed laddie who spent 5 years training in programming, has $100,000 in debt, and now the Indian will come and take that job, and that's all libertarianism, right? Well, if you look at the immigration, it has nothing to do with that. the immigration is a completely illegal scam by the government. It's illegal. What Trump just did, and I'll show you, shows that all of that was illegal. There was no legal basis for it. It's the bureaucrats, it's the state doing something that's illegal. And then Pavini might say, well, they are the exception. They can determine the exception. Okay, well, that's an interesting argument. The point is, these people were pumping people into these countries. No, first of all, no one voted for it. And secondly, most of it was illegal. They just, let's have a look.
Seems like, this was all planned. Managed to get that lawsuit right out there and right quick. Joining me now is Gavin Clarkson, former Trump administration deputy assistant secretary, who's written extensively on this and who knows all about this. Nice to see you, Gavin. Welcome into the show.
Well, thanks very much for having me on, and thank you to President Trump for ending the fraud of birthright citizenship by illegal aliens.
So, of course, liberals are freaking out about this. How dare he do this? How dare he block this sort of sacred, I guess, a sacred thing that's bestowed upon anyone who just happens to be born in the United States underneath the 14th Amendment. But as you've written, the 14th Amendment doesn't really stand for that at all. Can you explain why why that's not the case, and what do these lawsuits have any teeth?
Well, just to go back to one thing you said earlier, I actually don't think it was a surprise to the world that he did it. This is a president who makes promises and keeps promises. And he made a promise that he was going to shut down the border. He was going to stop all the fraud at the border. And clearly he's mentioned birthright citizenship in the past. And so I actually expected this to be one of the executive orders yesterday. And he followed through and kept his promise. But as you correctly point out, not only several states have filed suit, but also I believe the ACLU filed suit. And they have no basis in law. And you'll never hear them talk about the rule of law in these kind of lawsuits because they are wrong. The Supreme Court has opined twice on the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment. And that amendment specifies that, yes, you have to be born and naturalized into the United States, but it adds a qualifier under the jurisdiction thereof.
Okay, so here he's saying very clearly that the whole thing with birthright citizenship, so what's called, the anchor babies, all of that was completely illegal the whole time. So the question is, why are libertarians being blamed or like somehow being characterized as being in favor of this kind of stuff, which is all done by the leftists, by the state, and it's illegal. It has nothing to do with the free market, with movement of labor, with any of that stuff. It's people dumping, pregnant women coming to the US just to give birth so that they can have an anchor baby. In what way is that libertarian? Okay. The libertarians do not believe that anyone can just enter a country illegally. Okay. Anyway, so I think that it's very clear that this is a problem of the state and not of libertarianism. Okay, so that's my view of it. It has nothing to do with libertarianism. It has to do with the bureaucracy, the deep state, essentially doing something that is illegal. A lot of this stuff is illegal. Okay, let's have a look at another one. So here, now remember that Carl Benjamin was saying, talking about education and how, he's for private property. Well, here's a really good example of the problem of the state and private property. So this is about South Africa.
And here is a description of the bill, and I'm going to read from this because it's sort of got all the nuts and bolts and the important stuff, as well as a statement from Ramaphosa himself. And it's not too long, but it says, the bill repeals the Apartheid-era Expropriation Act of 1975, and that act sets out 3 requirements that must be met for an expropriation to be constitutionally permissible. And that ties into Section 25 as well, of the Constitution, which recognises expropriations as essential. And so basically, it's just trying to expand the legal ability to expropriate land.
Right.
And Section 25 of the Constitution recognises expropriation as an essential mechanism for the state to acquire someone's property for a public purpose or in the public interest, which means that people in South Africa basically don't have property rights. If the government wants your stuff, they can take it off you, and they don't really need, they can just say it's in the public interest, which is
the greater good.
Yeah, it's subjective enough that it could mean anything, couldn't it? And it says, this is subject to just and equitable compensation being paid. That word in particular, equitable, is always interesting, isn't it? Equitable quite often means whatever is in a non-white person's interest, funnily enough. And it carries on to say...
what they think is fair.
Exactly, which often means taking someone else's things, which is not fair.
What this is, just theft.
It is theft, yeah. And it says, the bill outlines how the president can expropriate land on what basis. And this is a direct quote here. This law will assist all organs of state, local, provincial and national authorities to expropriate land in the public interest for varied reasons. Local, provincial, national authorities will use this legislation to expropriate land in the public interest that seek, among others, to promote inclusivity and access to natural resources.
Right. So for social justice, we're going to steal your property.
Yeah, for the black majority, they can take the white minorities.
Okay, well, you can watch the rest of it yourself, but the ironies here are, shocking, because Carl Benjamin recognizes that this is essentially theft. But the thing is, what is it when the state, when you get paid and 20, 30 or 40% of your money is taken out of your pay packet? How is that different? Right? You worked, let's say you made $1,000. The government takes $300 or $400, whatever, right? Depending on the country, depending on your, income bracket. You see? But Carl Benjamin has no problem expropriating you and then giving the money to retrain the overeducated and underemployed British lad. He doesn't see that it's the connection. He thinks they're separate things. Because, well, why? Why is taking 30% of your income different from the? Is it because it's black people doing it to white people? Like, what's the difference? Okay, this is land. They're gonna take it. They need it. They need it for their political purposes. You need money for your political purpose of giving money, essentially, redistributing the money toward the British lad, the overeducated and underemployed British lad. So it's the same in that respect, right? It's a political purpose. You want to attract that as your voting constituency. You're in essential agreement with Dan Evans that you need to do something for them. You need to throw some money their way. Well, who are you throwing your money? The money you're earning at the Lotus Eaters? Or are you thinking, oh, no, it's not, I'm not going to pay out of my pocket. There is a budget, and that is the state's money. Well, where is that coming from? Well, it just rains out of the sky? I mean, the irony of this is, it's just there's this compartmentalization. This is expropriation, but this is all legitimate, it's tax money and everyone has to pay taxes. Well, how is the income tax was illegal in the US and most countries, right? It was unconstitutional. That's the government can come and take your earnings, right? Okay, so I think, again, libertarians are totally right on this issue, and the trads are totally out of touch. And then this one, let me see if I can get this guy says something very interesting here. So this they're talking about the grooming gangs in the UK, and it just the way this guy on the couch just put it was very interesting. So let's have a listen to this.
Extraordinary, Mr. Mark, what do you make of that? You're a numbers guy. What do you make of that then? So it appears pretty black and white that the vast majority of the public are in favour of an inquiry. They think there's been a cover-up. And actually, it turns out that quite a lot of people are in favour of the death penalty for people who do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, what's fascinating, we heard that just at the end of the interview with the pollster there, Britain isn't a particularly divided nation. Or if there is a division, it's between the people of Britain and the political establishment. That's the main division, right across all parties, all ethnic minorities, men, women. There's a pretty universal state of affairs here. And I was digging into some of the numbers also. I mean, the lack of trust, not just in politicians, but only 14% have a great deal of trust in the BBC. Only 8% have a great deal of trust in newspapers. Only 11% have a great deal of trust in social media. So trust is breaking down for all real established institutions. And you know what? The reason I'm unsurprised about this has been that the Labour MP for Rotherham, Sarah Champion, and the Labour MP for Rochdale, Paul Waugh, have both now changed their mind on the national inquiry. And
okay, so I just wanted to say, you know, we are in a situation where we're going to have a libertarian revolution, because what he said was exactly right. The division is exactly what Hermann Hoppe is talking about. There's a class consciousness among the people, the populace, versus the establishment. The establishment has become an elite, which is a monopolistic elite. It's not a natural elite. Okay, it's not what Hermann Hoppe means by natural elites that emerge naturally. These are people who have a monopoly on power. They have a legal hold on the country, and they've completely lost touch. And it seems to me that when you have this kind of monopoly, there's no feedback loop. So to go back to Cameron McGregor, he goes, well, look, China is building all these industries, you know. And the thing is, when you liberalize, when you have a free market early on, there are feedback loops established, and the economy is productive and things kind of function. And then when then there is a top-down kind of management and social engineering, those feedback loops start getting cut. But the whole thing will kind of keep going for a while. And at some point, and the elite thinks that things are the same as they used to be because they kind of worked. And if they worked, well, they will continue to work. But the thing is, they're becoming increasingly disconnected from the reality, right? All the feedback loops, okay, have been disestablished. These people no longer can communicate normally with normal people. They're so used to having a monopoly on, for example, information. And now Elon Musk comes in with Twitter, with X, and just demolishes the whole thing. And they're like, you know, they're in the headlights, like, and they're panicking, and they're starting to do stuff that is increasingly alienating them from the population. And this is happening all across the board in the West and in China as well, right? Now, the trajectory, the timeline is different, right? Because things, they're different situations. But the thing is, when you have this kind of monopolistic elite, okay, that is used to controlling things top down. Now, in Western countries in particular, psychological manipulation is really important, right? The legitimacy of the whole system depends on they can't use power, like they can't use force. So they have to, and one thing that Chomsky is right about is the manufacture of consent. So they have to manufacture consent. And they're losing that rapidly. Now, in China, it's different because in China, the state has pretty much total control over information flow inside of the country, right? So how that will play out is going to be different. And also in China, there is less of a, they're more comfortable using various more direct means, right, of using force. It's still psychological, but it's kind of demonstrative. You will have groups of police appearing. You will have these, police operations to show force. They will have various, right? They don't use these kind of psychological operations like in the West. But that's what's happening, is that you have this disconnect between these elites, which are the main thing in particular. It's not just that they are disconnected; it's that these elites are completely fake. They're completely astroturf. These are people who are not competent. They didn't rise to their position of power because they're good at anything. Okay, and this is the thing: is that you can be Nima Parvini and the Parvinistas sneering at Ayn Rand and the tech bros. But the thing is, at least the tech bros, they're good at something. They rose to their position because they're actually competent in some way. The politicians, and this is the point that Hoppe makes, is it's good to have competition when people are competing to provide the best product. You don't really want competition among people who are creating bads, who are expropriating you, who are lying to you, right? So politicians are selected on the basis of how good they are at lying and expropriating. Okay? So these people are pre-selected to be really nasty people. That's what politics is. Politics is a competition who is the best scoundrel. Okay? Whereas business is a competition of who is the best at solving problems. And this is something that the Parvinistas and people, and the Groypers really need to chew over, is the dynamics of the selective process. So these people are disconnected and they're incompetent. They're only competent at lying, and that's all they can do. And they can keep lying and manipulating and that kind of stuff. They can't solve problems because they weren't selected for the position for problem solving. That's why you need natural elites, right? And I'm going to make more videos about that, what natural, what that looks like, of people who are selected because they're actually competent at something, like whether they're competent at being a priest, or they're competent at being a technology, entrepreneurship, or they're good at, political analysis. But the thing is, the political analysis has to be based in some kind of a theory and not a model. And there's this model and there's this model, and the models, I think there needs to be a foundation. I'm a foundationalist, and I do believe in a priori knowledge and human universals, right? Okay, so I'm gonna make another video about, once I publish the article, and I will link the article under this video when I'm done with it, and talk to you next time.